Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Nathan. I'm actually the editor for Greg's videos that go out all over social media. We've been getting a lot of comments on the actual content, but with Greg's busy schedule, it's not super easy to sit down and reply back and forth to everybody. So we're going to try this new format where we take comments and messages that come in through the social platforms and answer them and send them back out so we can tag those people and get their questions answered.
Awesome. We really enjoy the questions and we want to find a way to get to them all. So hopefully you enjoy the format and hopefully you get something out of it.
This guy on Instagram who commented on one of the videos, his name is @squared. He says, we only have one residential property paid in full, but no LLC. Would you still suggest the LLC?
Okay, so I'm assuming he means he has an investment property and it's paid in full, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, I would recommend putting in an LLC. And I would just put one asterisk on that, and that is if you are thinking about refinancing that, and I'm not saying you should, but some people with a paid off property take half the money out of it and go buy another property. So if you've got one property paid off in full, it may make sense to take half the money out of that property in a refinance and buy a second property with 50% down. All right, so round numbers, you got $200,000 property, right? You take $100,000 out and use that 100 grand as a down payment on another $200,000 property. Now you've got the same $100,000 in equity. Sorry, the same $200,000 in equity, 100 here, 100 there, but you've got $400,000 worth of real estate. Why is that important? Because if real estate in that town goes up 5% of 200 grand is $10,000, which is great. You made 10 grand on a paid off property in equity. But 5% of 400 grand is 20 grand, which means you can double your appreciation by having essentially a double footprint with that. So I don't say you need to do that. If I had one paid off, I would think about it. He's doing the blowing the leaves right under my window. So
yeah,
it's okay though. The reason why this question comes up if you're thinking about putting it into an LLC is that as an individual, when you own a property, you can get much more favorable mortgage terms. Go to your local mortgage banker, look at the rates. If it's today, if it's July, August 2020, you're looking at rates in the threes. You can't get that loan if the LLC owns the property. Make sure when you do this, you tell the bank, I'm probably going to put this into an LLC later. Is that a problem? Just to make sure the bank you don't want to do anything the bank's going to think is squirrely, but I don't believe that is squirrely. I think buying it as an individual and then moving the asset into the LLC for liability protection is is a good idea, totally okay, but you might want to get that low interest mortgage before you do it so that you get the best of both worlds there.
@Eldorado999 asks, have you ever had any issues with tenants refusing to pay rent? For the first time in 10 years, I've considered selling my property out in Florida.
Okay. I have been really lucky where that's been pretty rare. When it has happened, I can think of two occasions. Both times the question was, what's going on in your life that you need to not pay your rent, right? Like this is, you have a conversation with a tenant. Now, if you manage yourself, you know your tenant. If you don't, your property management company will have this conversation, but professional property managers do exactly what I'm talking about. They call and they say, what's up? You didn't pay your rent. But there's like a tone of understanding in the beginning of the conversation that says, okay, something wrong, lose your job, right? This happened a lot during COVID, of course, right? When can you come up with it? What can you come up with now? Like you obviously want to keep a roof over your head, right? Like the assumption shouldn't be the person is looking to squat the place and then run out and leave you stuck, right? The assumption should be there's a reason why their situation went sideways. And if you contact them and say, like, we want to keep you in the place, we want to keep it all solid, so how can I help? Sometimes, can you give me half now? And then you put them on what we call a payment plan, right? Payment plan. Can you pay half now? Can you pay half at the end of the month? How can we work this out? Let me know, like, are you applying for jobs? You basically become a little bit of a counselor. I would do that. Now, if a person, again, COVID aside, because COVID, there are current laws against evicting people and things like that. But you have a right to evict somebody if you own a property, they sign the lease, they don't abide by the lease because they're not paying the rent. You have to get them out of there and you shouldn't feel guilty about it. But it's a really good idea. I had a tenant who had a problem. I gave him a payment plan as simple as they paid half a month and then they made up the half a month they missed over like a 3-month period. So it wasn't too painful. They've been living in the place for 9 years. right? And they paid the rent on
Yeah.
time every time. And they thank me for being a great landlord based on nothing except for what I did it was like 8 years ago. They were a year into it. So if you really internalize this idea that a tenant is a customer falls on hard
Right.
time, you want to ask the customer how you can maybe help bridge the gap, because they're your customer. You're their landlord. So you're responsible. It's like not a customer who fixes a flat on your car. You're a customer. They're a customer of yours, and you put a roof over their head and maybe their family's head. So like being a good person, a good landlord is really, really meaningful to the tenants. Right?
Yeah.
Being a hard ass is like, I got a hard ass for a landlord, which makes my housing stability feel less stable. If I've got a person with a heart who believes culturally in developing this relationship over time, if you have that in your head and heart as a landlord, you make a lot of right decisions. So I don't know about the situation with the Instagram guy in Florida. It might be the right time to dump it, but if it's the first time you've had problem collecting rent, maybe it'd be a good idea to add up all the rent you've been able to collect over the years and compare that against what you're losing right now. Find out what the laws are in terms of evicting somebody, because if you do an outreach and it goes nowhere, you have to evict them, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. A bad tenant doesn't mean a bad investment property or a bad investment plan. It means it's a hassle, right?
Right.
Like we've talked about that a lot. Like people who own houses who don't realize they're a business. Like if you owned a store and there was a flood, would you be like, I own a tennis racket store and my office flooded, so I hate tennis rackets. I'm out of the tennis racket business. Why? Because you had a flood? Like, fix it up and then start selling tennis rackets again. If you own rental property and it's been going well and you have a bad tenant situation, replace the tenant, go back to the plan again. So I'd hang on to it. I know, here's the fact that I know. 90% of the time when you sell a property, 10 years later, you feel like you wish you kept it.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm part of some of these Facebook, I guess, groups where they just talk about real estate investing. And there's one really specific towards landlords, and people will post like a scenario of something they're dealing with a tenant. And some people, they seem to handle it pretty well. But if someone says something, if they post like an interaction they had with a tenant where they were just kind of being a jerk, all the other people in the community will just like eat them alive. Be like, why are you being such a jerk? Like,
yeah, man, residents are, look, the world appropriately, this country appropriately looks out for the underdog, right? I think that's great. I've been an underdog, so I appreciate that when the situation is, I'm mostly an underdog. Somebody's down on their luck, and landlords get a reputation for being villains in part, I think, connected to that idea. Like, dude, again, think of a bizarre analogy. Okay, there are people who, my tenant didn't pay the rent, or the toilet broke, I'm sick of this, I'm selling the house, I'm out of it. That sounds a lot like a restaurateur who has a couple of customers complain about their dinner and starts knocking tables over and say, everybody get the fuck out of my restaurant, close this place down, I'm sick of this. Like, it makes no sense. Yeah. They're thinking about it like, I invest in stocks and nobody ever calls me again until I want to sell, or until it goes nosediving down, then I call, right? But like everybody in a business always assumes there's going to be days that it's like a headache. It gives you problems, right? Mm. But they all understand that it would be stupid to like shut it all down because a hassle came up. So when you expect it, if you know that at some point you're going to get a phone call and a tree branch fell on the roof, like I should have fixed the tree branch, and you're mad at yourself for it, you don't just start knocking tables over and quitting the whole thing. What are you going to do? Go to the bank and give the bank your money every month and get 0% interest? So I don't know where we got on that tangent, but all
right.
No, it was you were saying that some people they ripped the guy to shreds for being mean to the tenant. Well, if you hear about a restaurant that throws a customer out the door because they complained about the food, you think the restaurateur is a jerk, right? Yeah. Customer has a right to complain.
Yeah, it was something like the guy's oven or something didn't work, and they were like, I cannot get you a new oven until like this weekend because my truck has something on it already. And people were like, dude, the guy needs an oven. Like what are you?
Yeah, call Sears and have them deliver it, right?
Yeah.
But listen, the sympathy, landlords, like most other sort of stereotypical myths out there, they're all based in something real. Like landlords have been assholes for decades, generations. I mean, this is the oldest asset class, right? Shelter is the oldest asset class. There was some grunting caveman at one point who had 2 caves because he was big. And he
Yeah.
let the other guy stay in the cave if he went out and, I don't know, found him some squirrels or something. So, it's like, you can stay here for 2 squirrels a month. And then the guy's late with a squirrel and he goes and throws him off the cliff. It's like, don't throw him off the cliff because he'll come up with 3 squirrels tomorrow. That's good. It's yeah, you can't be a tough guy, a villain. Landlords need to be always cognizant of the fact that they are holding the keys to that person's housing stability. Like, we had a chance to see, because of COVID, back a few months ago, we didn't know. Like in March, we didn't know. Anybody going to pay their rent? What's going to happen? Like, what's going to happen? If half of the tenants in our properties don't pay the rent, we're in real trouble, right? So they might be in trouble, but then we're in trouble, and it just cascades from there. What we learned is that housing stability is an essential, right? Everyone knows housing is essential, right? You can't go live in the gutter, right? That's an obvious one. But what came into focus was that housing stability is critical. We had 97% of the rents. Renters Warehouse got 22,000 houses across the country that we manage. 97% of the rents were paid in April, the first month, of, right? 97%. What does that tell you? That whatever is going on, we're not going out there. We're staying in here, because you go out there and you catch the Black Death. So you got to stay in here.
Yeah.
Housing stability really mattered. The first thing a lot of politicians did, put a moratorium on foreclosures and evictions. Why? Because housing stability is essential. We have had a lot of people moving. And one of the things, meaning a tenant leaving a property, a new tenant coming into the property, we've had an unprecedented number of people who signed leases on properties before they even saw the property. Now, what is that about? That's because they need a place to live. And which place is less important than when, right? Like, when, as soon as we need it. And I'm not going to, the idea of losing a couple of bidding wars. It's like, how much? $1,500 a month. I'll take it. Don't you want to see it? I can see it in the pictures. I drove by. I'm good. Send me the application. We got a lot of that, hundreds of those. Housing stability is critical. So when you're a landlord, you're responsible for somebody's housing stability, or you could be the cause of housing instability because you're acting like a dick. Where you push them around because you can, or you're impatient with them instead of working with them. It's a better business strategy to love your customers and figure out how you can help them if they need it. That sounds like so flowery, but it's like, just take a second and think about what would happen if your phone rang next month and your landlord told you 60-day notice, see you later, right? Like, wait, what? Like, my daughter's going to college in 3 weeks. I'm going to be crying for 2 weeks after she leaves. I don't have time to find a new place to live. I had all kinds of plans. Like, what do you mean? Yeah, what I mean is you have to go. You got to read your lease, 60 days notice, hit the bricks. That can happen to people that are renting. Like, it does happen to people that are renting. And it's like, I don't think landlords know what a sharp jab that is, because they just don't internalize the fact that, these people, that's where their kids go to bed at night. Scary proposition when you can't be sure where they're going to be going to bed at night in a few months. So,
right. And just being good to the tenants is like the most practical idea for it to work out long term.
Yeah. I'm not Mother Teresa. I do it because it's good and right in general, but it's like a really smart. It's not bad business. Like, that's kind of the thing. Like, some people who indulge themselves and push tenants around do it because they think being firm is the right thing. But, like, again, go back to any other business you did business with. And when they're firm with you, how long do you hang around? Right?
Yeah.
Like, excuse me, sir, there's only one item in the, 2 items in the dressing room at a time, sir. It's like, you know what? Here you go. Bye.
Yeah. So at Mason Plass asks, what about when everyone's unemployment benefits drop off at the end of July? Do you think that will negatively affect the market?
The real estate market, I assume they're asking about, and the answer is yes, because whenever demand slips, right? Demand to buy houses is going to slip every time unemployment goes up. Okay, so if unemployment's up, but unemployment benefits wind down. Now, one thing I want to clarify, I think he's talking about the federal unemployment benefits, which is like $600 a week on top of the state benefits. State benefits aren't going away in July. So anytime you see anything that holds back demand, it's not a positive thing for the market. Okay, people have to get this idea through their head that everything bad for the market isn't a housing collapse. All right. In fact, there's only been 2 housing collapses in the last 100 years: Great Depression, Great Recession. And there's nothing on the books right now that indicates that demand for housing is declining. In fact, it's increasing right now. There are people that are moving, getting out of cities. That houses themselves are in more demand now than I think I've ever seen them, actually, related to COVID. However, if people can't pay the rent, they're going to default on the rent. If they can't pay as much rent, then rents are going to flatten out, not continue to increase over time, or they're even going to come down, right? If people can't buy, and they won't buy, eventually sellers will have to make their houses more affordable, and it'll bring prices down. If COVID, which I have no experience with anything like this, and so if COVID drags the economy down for a protracted period of time, then we're going to have a recession that goes on for a few years, and that will that'll eventually lead to lower home ownership numbers. But again, it's shelter, right? So lower home ownership numbers means increases in rentership numbers. It's a zero-sum game here. One lever goes up, the other one goes down. One lever goes down, the other one goes up. So that's going to create more rental households. They're going to have to find a place to live. And so if you have the $3,000 a month rental home, you may not have enough people that want to rent that. You have the $1,200 a month rental home, you might be sitting right in the perfect spot, because the guy that used to live in a $2,000 a month house, he needs that $1,200 a month rent now, right? Mm-hmm. So the beauty of houses is that what our question here kind of goes to is, the winds blow a different direction on the economy. How does it affect the housing market? There's this one key principle to single family homes that makes them so incredibly flexible and resilient in all these situations. And that is, a house is either going to be owner occupied or it's going to be tenant occupied. It's either going to be owned by the occupant or it's going to be owned by an investor and occupied by a tenant. So like I said, when the economy goes bad, home ownership goes down, people's confidence goes down, they don't buy houses, right? Home ownership rates go up, home ownership goes down. Rentership goes up at the exact same time. So you win on rental demand, even if you're kind of losing on property value. So your property value might flatten out, but your place is going to stay occupied, and you're going to be able to get your rents because they need a place to live. There's more renters, therefore more demand, therefore your rental rates are going to be supported, and you're going to have that place occupied. Economy swings the other way, things start going real well again. Well, what happens? Home ownership rates begin to increase. There are less renters. Doesn't mean your house is going to go vacant. You're going to win on a good economy either way, but now hopefully you're going to make up for some of that lost time on appreciation. Because when home buyers are buying, it's driving prices up. And your value is not just tied to what it's worth to an investor. Your home value is really tied to what it's worth to home buyers, right? Yeah. So it has this two-sided coin that you flip it either direction and it still winds up being resilient, which is why a lot of commercial investors right now, especially post-COVID, companies that own office buildings that are in jeopardy because people are telecommuting now, like everywhere.
Yeah.
Zoom versus office buildings, and Zoom is winning, right? Retail shopping centers, Amazon is winning. Malls are losing. Multifamily in cities. Okay, we've got cities that people are like, okay, I'm good with this. I'm done with this. I'm over the city life. I want to go out and have a backyard. So multifamily is losing. In all three of those cases, single family rentals doesn't have the same problem. Nobody is not living indoors because of COVID. Nobody is not living indoors because they don't have to go to the office anymore. All of this actually accrues towards people's desire to have a house, rental or owner occupied either way, or an investment. So it's almost like a risk management feature. The fact that the house has two purposes, owner occupied, tenant occupied, that no other asset class in real estate has.
Yeah. And based on what we've seen, and I mean, like, that's the number one thing people want to keep is their house. Like,
yeah, if you leave, you die. Didn't you know?
Yeah, exactly.
If you leave, you get arrested. You get pepper sprayed. You see the guy who got pepper sprayed in the dog park? He wasn't wearing a mask and he got pepper sprayed in the dog park by some lady.
I think I might have seen that, actually.
That doesn't happen at home. At home, you can take your mask off. No one's going to pepper spray. You need a house.